What's up, everybody? Welcome to Inside the Seams, where we bring hitters and pitchers together to talk about the game so it can grow. I'm really excited about this episode. You're going to love it. Let's keep going. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Inside the Seams, where we bring hitters and pitchers together to grow as baseball players so we can get it right and achieve everything that we want to in our baseball or softball careers. With me, as always, is I got the Yoda hippie from Arizona, John Huizinga. Let's see the shirt today. What do we got?
Home now.
What do we
We
got?
got Bigfoot. Bigfoot's riding the moose.
Bigfoot's riding a moose. I'm in
Teaching some
100%.
gibberish.
Yes, let's go. For the audio people, if you can't see it, he's got a moose and a Bigfoot riding him with his favorite phrase on the bottom. It's amazing. I'm in for it. Zing, I'm glad to see you. I'm glad I get to talk to you. Man, I'm excited about this conversation. We got a awesome guy that I actually was introduced to through Zing a little while ago, year and a half ago or something like that, and I'm really grateful for him and who he is and our friendship. And so it's really cool just to kind of hear the friendship between John and Todd as well. So with us, we got Todd Nissel. Nissel, there it is. Nissel. I even practiced it and I screwed it up. Todd Nissel. There it is, like missile. He even told me how to do it. So Todd is a gem. He is one of the strongest humans you'll ever come around. He's also got a huge heart, got a bear of a heart as well. Big time fitness guy, but also really, really great with catching and hitting and just everything baseball. So, man, dude, I'm so glad, Todd, that you're on here, bro. I've been wanting to make this happen for a while, man. Glad that you're here and just pumped to hear your perspective and for everybody else to hear it too, man. So welcome.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely, man. So, man, kind of tell everybody a little bit about yourself, just so they can get to know you a little bit. And we've got a really cool kind of topic of conversation we're going to jump into, but I want y'all to get to know Todd a little bit beforehand, then we'll jump right in.
Sure. So I caught through high school and college. I am a Fuel Factory Island boy, as John likes to say it. Played baseball, fell in love with it, but I really learned baseball when I was at Fuel Factory. My last year of college, I found kinesiology, which led me to strength and speed. It's what I did for as long as I can remember, and it paired very well with baseball. Currently, I am the catching coordinator at Impact Training for the Midwest Rebels, and I get the opportunity to talk to some really cool people like you guys.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Well, man, like we were, I thought, and for those of y'all that don't know, the Midwest Rebels are a pretty big organization in the Midwest. So Todd's seen a lot of people. They've got a very unique dynamic. And one of the things that we were talking about that he said he's really been pushing into, and pushing on John a lot too, because John's got such a good culture wherever he goes. But it's just like, how do you build a culture within teams? How do you build a culture within a select organization or a high school team or above from that, right? I think everybody's got theories, but theories don't really matter. It's what actually comes down to it and what actually happens, right? So, yeah, I just kind of wanted to throw that out there and kind of let John and Todd, kind of jump on that. It's just like, so guys, like, how do you think building a culture starts? Where does it start? How does it start? Anything like that?
Take it away, John.
All right. I mean, I think culture is going to start with the coach, right? So the things that you exemplify, the things that you walk are going to be the things that happen, right? We were talking a little bit before we started, but about boundaries and learning how to draw the line in the sand where it's like the things that are acceptable, the things that are unacceptable, but then teaching your guys how to think instead of just what to think. And part of that comes with anticipation, baseball IQ, and some of it's just through conversation with guys and figuring out where they're at. But I think breeding that culture where the guys are competitive, ultra competitive amongst themselves and with themselves leads to that culture that you're looking for. That's going to be the winning culture on the field. And I think that's the fun part, right? And each situation and each group might be a little bit different, but I think the common denominator in it is you as the coach.
Really good.
100%. 100%. I think there was a couple of quotes that I had heard. A coach is not judged by his standards, but by what he tolerates. And I think as a head guy, your job, like if you think of it as driving a car, right? The goal is to get to the championship, right? That's point B. We start at point A. Your job is to keep the car on the road, going the right direction, the right speed. Where your assistant coaches or your brakes and steering and whatever. I think when you can get that car going the right direction, you let all the pieces work for themselves. For instance, John was talking about have your players make decisions. Like what makes me think of is wouldn't during a game would just sit there because it was all done during practice. I think when you look at what's the difference between a boss and a leader, where a boss is telling people what to do and making them do it, a leader is showing them how to do it. So rather than always having a subordinate, by the time the leader's done, he has another leader standing next to them. So now that leadership is that much stronger. And I think as difficult as that can be, and we like to talk about amazing pitchers just being donkeys. Donkeys can be stubborn, but if you get them going the right way and think that's where they want to go, it's the best tool that any farmer or anybody could ever have. You have a good donkey going the right direction. That's just the hard part, getting them going the right direction.
Yeah, that's really good. I think there's, and even within that example, right? And I don't know, there's not a lot of people that know this or understand this, but like most ranchers or even farmers get a donkey no matter what. Because like if you have cattle or chickens or whatever, right? If you have any kind of livestock, the donkey will, if a coyote comes or, you know, anything like that comes, the donkey will kill. It will stomp. Like they will get donkeys to hang out with horses, and horses are way more powerful than donkeys. Donkeys are freaking, like, you watch out, man. I don't turn my back on a donkey ever. And they do it, right? If you ever drive by a ranch, look, and you'll see this one donkey or two donkeys out with all these head of cattle, and you're like, what the heck? Why do they have a donkey? They have it for that reason, because exactly what you're saying. When they get moving towards it, or if push comes to shove, right? Like the donkey's gonna stomp the coyote. Like that's just they're not gonna kick them, they're gonna stomp them, right? And it's funny because I have a cattle dog, and she can tell any cow. I've seen her. She's 40 pounds, and she never had any kind of training, but she just knows how to herd because that's her job.
Yep.
And man,
we have
like,
3.
yes, I got a blue heeler, right? You know, 100%. And like, I've seen her tell 1,500, 2,000 pound bulls what to do, and like they got them squealing and nervous and all this. A 40-pound dog, a donkey, like you gotta be. I was always careful. I was like, listen, girl, like I hear you, but like we're gonna stay away from the donkey. She'll stomp you, right? Or he'll stomp you. And I think that's the challenge, right? Is we want donkeys, we want dogs, you know, whatever that term is, but how do we get them pointed in the right direction, right? And y'all were talking about something earlier pre-show where it was kind of like the 4 walls, right? Can y'all jump into that a little bit, Todd? You were talking about that. So John, you had some good thoughts on that too. So
Sure. So basically, it's something that I had found and figured out. I'm not going to say I wish I found it early, but it was earlier in my coaching career when I was dealing with travel ball organizations. So you have them 1 to 2 nights a week and maybe every 3rd or 4th weekend, right? So how can you establish those relationships while allowing them to grow and then keep discipline? It's a balance. And what I found is if I give them a quote unquote a box, right? You can think of a fenced in area, whatever. You can do whatever you want in this box. But as soon as you leave the box or get over the fence, I pull you back in and then we start again. And it kind of gives them room or gives them boundaries to know how to operate. But I can't let them get too far where now we're causing issues. And it was something that I found success in as far as being a head guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are your thoughts on that, John? That concept?
Yeah, I mean, I think same thing. Even if it's like fun little competitive games, you know, where you'll do certain stuff in a circle or you do certain stuff in a box. You can do things in lines just to create those different patterns, but also those competitive environments where it's like, I think it's very important that we know what the rules are to play a game the right way, right? Like if the three of us were going to play, let's just say Monopoly, and we were going to sit down and you guys both knew how to play and I'd never played before, you obviously have an advantage, right? Because there's some strategy that goes into this game. And we always say, you hear guys say, hey, he's playing chess, not checkers.
Yeah.
Right. And what does that mean? Well, that means that this guy is somebody who's anticipating what's about to happen, like we were talking about before too, where it's like some of these things can start to establish lines, but they can also teach them how to think for themselves. So when they're in game, something happens and they already knew it was going to happen because they anticipated it.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, go ahead, Todd. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I remember I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of special operations guys, and shout out to those 12-mile rucks and the Bradshaws if you're listening. And I remember asking, because it was a lot of Green Berets and it's unconventional, right? But they spend so much time on the conventional. And I asked the question, like, why? If you spend so much time outside the box, why are you trying to learn how to operate in it? And his answer was, if you learn how to operate inside the box and you learn where that is, you know how to operate outside of it. You know where, how you can push those things. And learning, like John loves to say, and this is something I struggle with because I had I got yelled at when I played. That's what made me want to become a coach. And the first time I ever heard this was from John, but it was learning through play and watching Fuel Factory, because I'd never seen a quote unquote practice like this. And all of a sudden these kids were just getting it, and they were working so hard, and they never even thought they were working. They were just having a blast because they were quote unquote playing. They were being competitive. They set it up with them. Like, it was the coolest thing I've ever experienced. And it made me deep dive and sit there. And I mean, I think you've talked about like just going to Fuel Factory and just watching and just listening. And I remember, I forget if it was a couple episodes ago, but I remember you talking about your first experiences with Zing, and it was fun because I got to like relive those because I'm like, yes, I remember that.
That's cool.
A lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well, and I think like what's really cool about what y'all are talking about with that, right, is so there's a lady who was kind of like she was like a mentor to my parents and us, like growing up and stuff, and she had a lot of stuff happen in her life, but she really turned it towards really cool stuff, right? She was just such a good responder to turmoil. And so she ended up becoming one of the top child psychologists. So child being 18 and below, child psychologists in the world. Like towards the end of her life, she was flying everywhere to talk about this thing. And so she did some research on exactly what you mentioned, play. How much faster people learn when they play. And so I've read a bunch of her research, and it's cool, like now as an adult, getting to read the research, right? But she essentially said it takes hundreds of reps, if I'm remembering right, hundreds of reps to do it just the normal way or via memorization or whatever. Like, put it in baseball terms, just the regular old practices, right? The boring practices where it's front toss and it's this, and just the boring old stuff takes hundreds and hundreds of reps to fine tune a new skill, learn a new skill, assimilate it. Well, this was over thousands of kids' research, like all this stuff. She said that through her research, she found that when people were having fun, went from hundreds to between 10 to 20 repetitions to learn it. That's it. When they were having fun. And it's so cool. Like, I was talking to an organization a couple weeks ago, and we are talking about like what I'm doing with Propel ID and the brain and like, all these different things. And so their coach was there. I was watching practice after I talked to him. And so this was a thing that happens all the time, right? But they finish sitting around, pick up the balls, pick them, they all run in there. What happens almost every single time? They shoot. Kobe, right? Or whatever it is now. Seth Curry, like whatever it is, right? It was always Kobe for us. And you sit there, right? And I looked at the coach, he started getting frustrated. I was like, bro, I hear you. I totally hear you. I really do. But why do you think that they're doing that? Could be lots of reasons, but they're implementing fun into something they're doing. right? So we can interpret that in two ways, right? Like, dude, quit freaking shooting the ball. Like, it's stupid. Like, just pick up the daggone balls. We got to keep to the schedule. We got to get done. Like, all stuff. I get that. That's fair. Like, there's a time and a place for that, 100%. And at the same time, I was like, you could also interpret it as maybe it's time to inject a little bit of fun, a little bit of play into this.
Well, like the players are balancing it out. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Do you
go ahead, John? I'm sorry.
I had Will Marshall was out here last week from 108 Performance. You know, we love Willie.
Oh, yeah.
And he came out to practice, and we were talking about batting practice, and it was a day that we had the machine out. And he goes, hey, try this. He goes, if they get a hit, they get another swing. If they're out, they got to get out of the cage. And you just set a timer. So we set a timer for 12-minute rounds with 5 guys, and the quality of those swings just went through the roof, and nothing else had to be said except for you get a hit, you get another swing. If you're out, you leave the cage. And then all of a sudden they start competing for who can get the most in a row. And that was nothing I put in. That was nothing Will mentioned. That just kind of naturally brewed because guess what? When you're having fun, you compete. And that's what we're looking for. And we're talking about dogs and horses and donkeys and all these beasts, the Bigfoots riding moose. Like those guys are having fun. Those guys are playing the game, right? We say it all the time, but it's like the umpires never came out and said, work ball, think ball. It's like, no, he says play ball because there is a certain part of this game that rewards that, right? And I think as coaches in our culture, if we're talking about culture and we want guys to compete and play the game the right way, well, then we need to put that into our structure, you know, and making different things competitive, you know, even between your groups. Your shagging group is competing, and your base running group is competing, and your hitting group is competing. And then when you play the game, that's all you do.
All you do. And that's where, right, we talk about this a lot, but that's where kids learn I have a good enough swing, or I have a good enough mechanics, or I have good enough arm action to throw a strike here or get a hit here, even if something's messed up, right? That's where they learn those things, because sometimes they're unaware of the imperfections. Sometimes they know the imperfections, but if it's like, hey, if I'm in a cage and I know I get to stay, if I get a hit, I'm going to figure out how to get a hit. And the brain is going to perform when there's reward and pressure, right? People run from pressure. I think one of the best things you can do is name pressure and put it in the stands. And every single time you go up to hit, you look at pressure, and I always had expletives for it, right? But it can also be like, hey man, see you there. Doesn't matter, right? So like, that's how they learn how to do those things. And the cool part about that's within the walls of baseball. That is within the confines of baseball, right? Producing and winning baseball games has not changed. Ever. Score more runs than the other person. That's it. That's the bottom line. Score more runs, keep winning, don't lose. That's the bottom line. That's a big space. So it's like, if we want them to actually learn how to do that, do I have enough confidence as a coach in setting the culture to allow them to do something like that and maybe mess around too much? Okay, that's fair. What are you willing to take? Do you want robots or do you want problem solvers? Right? That's the only thing that's there. That's such an easy, tangible way to where it's like, hey, this is really easy. Because it's like, even if you're not a super competitive person, it's like, man, if I want to hit, if you don't do that, if you don't hit, you're going to get about four swings in 12 minutes. It's like, listen, ain't nothing personal, but I'm trying to get some work in. So y'all ain't going to hit. I'm hitting. I'm going to hit for 6 minutes. You watch me. And it's like, that's how you develop competitiveness, right? People are always looking for these things like, oh, these kids. Like, that's one of my favorite lines. John's voice of that is probably the best. Oh, these kids. It's so good. But it's like,
when I say these darn kids.
Yeah, these darn kids. Like, but you sit there and it's like, we just have to teach them. They don't know how to do this part, right? And John was talking about anticipation, and he brought like an OG of OGs out to his baseball practice and was like, He's talking about stuff that's simple, and if it's just the information, it's not valuable. But it's what comes mixed in with the information that's valuable, right?
Yep.
When somebody hears anticipation, they don't know what that means. They don't have a clue what that means. But teaching them that within the confines of baseball, that's where it's like, man, there was a junior college that they spent they didn't spend a bunch of time on bunt coverages, right? They took the time for the bunt coverages and they spent it on base running. And I'll tell you what, those suckers took every extra base, and everything was a daggum double. Everything they hit to the outfield was a double. And it was obnoxious, man, but they would beat people 20-4, 18-2. People would always just like, dude, these guys bang. And they did. Like, they hit the ball. But every time somebody hit the ball and got a base hit, they were on second base. Every single time. And so it's like, that's taught, right? And I think like there's a phrase that I love that says like, more is caught than taught. And realistically, we got to stop being so insecure that it's like we have to be the teacher of everything. It's like, no, teach it, then let them catch it, or model it, and they're gonna catch it. You catch more is caught than taught, right? And I think that's where this whole thing, that's something simple. You could implement that, though, like what John said, you could implement that right now, today, and it would be different. Immediately, it would be different, right? And it's like you could do that with anything. You can do pickoffs, you can do double cuts, you can do all it is, right? You could add punishment in there. If you like being a dick, like add punishment in there. Do it. Like that's fine, right? Like whatever. You want to do that? Do it. Hey, if you don't do this, you got to run. You got to run a lap. Do it. I don't care. Like whatever. But it's like it can't just be external motivators. It has to be internal motivators too. It has to be both, I think.
I want it, man. Well, I'm happy to hear about 108 doing that because I organically came about that, but I do it with catchers. So we get the machine and you can catch another one if you make your glove pop. So if you make your glove hitting the right spot, you're going through the right angle, because if you're tackling the wrong one, you won't. And ultimately, it's controlling. And then if there's a 50-50, I make the other catchers say if he's in or not, or she at this point.
Yeah.
And what that makes them do is talk. And they have to do hard conversations. And John, I can let him talk about, if he wants to, the pterodactyl thing. But another thing with pressure was I make catchers get their gear on in 45 seconds. It sounds really fast. It's not. Like I had an 11-year-old softball chick do it in 37 the other day.
It's not hard. It's not hard at all.
What I found is scouts, like it's one little thing, like they'll look at how you place your glove, because chances are you didn't buy your glove, somebody bought it for you. How do you treat it? Because it's your tool. The quality of your glove can dictate, especially at high velocities. But a catcher that can't get in their gear quickly probably doesn't spend a lot of time in it. And I'll use that, like especially the first couple times when they start getting it. I mean, they can have a conversation once they figure it out. But the first couple times I'll use it as pressure. And I'll put it, and I'm like, great, where'd you feel your pressure? Like for me, I feel it right here. It feels almost like a slow, consistent push. Some feel it in their stomach, some feel it in their chest. But I tell them, I was like, I can't put pressure on you. That's you. Now I could sit on you. I could put physical pressure on you, but like I can't put emotional pressure or mental pressure. And I'm like, then you teach them breath, which that's another thing John talks about. My goodness, breath, right? Take a breath.
Oh man.
And then chewing gum and seeds. Like your ancestors, if they were eating, probably weren't being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. So if you're chewing something, your brain thinks you're eating, which means you're safe. And it's just one thing to learn, because everybody responds to pressure different, but you want to be able to handle your pressure, because pressure is a privilege. So
I love that. What's your, I want to hear this pterodactyl story, John. What do you got?
Well, the pterodactyl was kind of an alter ego back in the day, and then sometimes when I get excited, he still comes out for the guys that are training. We had a video the other day, but yeah, he's very loud.
Is it you?
So I have to make my catchers yell. So nobody ever taught me how to yell. And my first month of catching, I had an Australian accent. I have no business having an Australian accent. I did 23andMe. There was no reason. but it's just how to yell. And like, if you push through your chest and it comes out higher and it's pressed, but if you do a diaphragm press, it comes out deeper in the lower wave. So I'll have them yell, pick a number 1 through 4. You can probably guess why. And then I'll yell, and because it's not normal for a human being to yell in front of a group of people. It's just, you don't want to attract the attention. Mm-hmm. So then I'll start yelling like peanut butter and jelly, purple, and nobody cares. Well, at Fuel Factory, I had this one catcher that wouldn't yell. And so I told John, I was like, hey, remember your pterodactyl? He goes, yeah. And I'm like, hey, are you all right if I yell at you? Hey, John, we do a pterodactyl. And he's across the facility because I need this kid to be like, it's okay. Because it's absolutely insane when he does it. And I was like, all right, he won't do it. I was like, hey, John, you do this pterodactyl. It just lets this thing go. And it gets the kid to start talking. And it's just this little baby progression. But once people learn that like that fear is normal, and they learn that you can just take a breath and it becomes easy. I'm never going to say it's going to be easy, but it becomes easy. You're capable of it. It's just that next step. It's that next level, that next mental hurdle that you have to go in this beautiful journey in baseball.
Yeah, I think it allows you to slow things down. I think that's the key, where it's like, you know, how the game starts, the pressure you're talking about is sometimes related as speeding up, right? And you'll see a guy, maybe he's playing third base, and I mean, we call it the hot corner for a reason, right? You see a guy that can play shortstop or second base all day, and you put him at third, and all of a sudden you got 5 errors. And it's not because they're not doing enough, it's because they're doing too much. They're freaking out just a little bit when it's learning how to move through the ball still. Relax. You know, I think
you just don't know what pitch is coming or when it's coming. Good luck.
Well, that's where the grace to allow those conversations. There's a how to that. Right? There's a how to learning going through that as well, right? And it's like, just like, people will hear off the wall stuff, and there's a sector they're like, oh, that's just stupid, or that's eyewash, and it's like, man, they don't know how. So you're the kind of person, like, if we're talking about this certain sector, it's like, you're the kind of person that's complaining about it, but you won't teach them how to do it. That's a special kind of idiot, like special kind. like that's an ultimate dick move. Oh, you ain't doing it right. Well, how do I? I'm not telling you. You got to figure it out. Oh, wait a minute now. That's kind of messed up. And it's like learning how to do that, where it's just like, hey, dog, like, I may move you to third base, and you may have 5 of them. The next one, you're gonna after the 5th error, you may just. I mean, I had a kid that, like, I did that to, and man, like, the next one, he literally just took it right off the chest. He didn't even try to like field it or nothing. He just literally dropped down, let it hit him in the chest. He picked it up and threw it over. And I was like, okay, cool. Now build off of that. Now, like, you don't want to have freaking, like, you're gonna look like somebody's abusing you, right? Like, we gotta figure that out. But it's like the room within the confines to figure that out, right? And that's,
I think sometimes too, you got to take them outside, like we talked about, inside the box and outside the box. Sometimes, and I'll even say a lot, not even just sometimes, things that are outside of baseball that become relatable to the sport. So it's like, for me, I grew up shooting a lot of archery. I hunted and also shooting. And the half breath that I had learned from shooting is the same half breath that I was taught on the mound. But it happened to be when I was a kid, 12 years old, pulling back that bow and arrow and shooting, right? That was instinctive, versus like my first pro experience. I'll always remember it because I went out and I couldn't see the catcher. And it was like everything was blurry. The game had sped up on me, everything that had happened. And all of a sudden the inning was over. I'm sitting back in the dugout and it was like, what just happened? And that was a completely different feeling than once I learned how to take the breath that I had used in archery and put it into my throw. And I think that it's something that if we can, you know, teach something like a box breath is something that we do a lot. We'll lay the guys down, they go through, some guys call it meditation, some guys call it breath work, some guys call it visualization, right? It's a little bit of all of it, but it's like teaching the skill of calm has to happen not in the game first, right? It has to happen somewhere where it's a comfortable situation. Maybe it's quiet, or there's some type of meditation or some good frequency music going. And then all of a sudden you turn that music up and you turn something else on, and can you still find the calm even though AC/DC's playing? And then can you go apply that in a game now or a practice situation where it's like, okay, now do the breath. And now all of a sudden you're in the game, and all of a sudden it just trickles to that next level, and it becomes natural and instinctive once you're taught it, but to just throw guys out there and tell them, hey, breathe. I mean, I see guys all the time and they say, breathe. And it's like, okay, well,
thanks.
What does that mean? Right. It's like, it's such a simple thing. I think it's one of those things that, some guys look at it like, oh yeah, breath is eyewash. And it's like, well, yeah, if you have no idea how to use it.
Exactly.
Right. It's like any tool could be worthless. I mean, I'm sitting in my garage right now. I have my tool belt right over there. Right. It's got, let's say, 12 different tools in it. If I never learn how to use those tools for certain applications, then how does that work? So I think when we're talking about culture, we're teaching these kids how to use the specific tool at that time, right? Or for that given task, whether it's moving a runner or it's getting somebody in or it's cutting down the run at the plate. It's all something that's just, it's been practiced so many times. It's just instinct now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what it comes down to, right? Is like, take for instance, like we were talking about cattle dogs. I'm going to use that as an example. It's easy to have, right? But the best cattle dogs in the world have great instincts and great training. The ones that you can watch on YouTube, right, where they like whistle and they go one direction, they whistle again and they do a different. It's crazy. Or like, like I always use verbal commands with mine, where it's like stand, stop, right, get around, get this way. But like, just because you have good instincts doesn't mean that you don't need training. Just in the same vein, if they have good training, but they don't have the instincts or haven't been given the ability to develop the instincts, then it's got to work together, right? Because when my dog first started getting around cattle, she would do it. I didn't know words, no anything, but it was very not sloppy was the wrong word, but it just took longer than it should have, and it's like to be expected. She'd never been trained, but like at the same point, you sit there and it's like she just needed to be trained a little bit, and the instinct part is something that needs to be developed in this generation of player. How do you develop instinct? Well, I think it's difficult, but you do exactly what we're talking about. You have those conversations, you do those type of things, you develop the instinct, develop the feel to where, like, my favorite thing that I hear at baseball yard is throw strikes. Like, I literally, every time I hear it, I look for a baseball. I look for a baseball to throw at that person. Not like hard, but just like 4 bounces. Like, hey, shut up. Like, you sound like you have an IQ of a 12-year-old, and you're like 12 of 12, and like you're not. Stop it. But it's like, what does that mean, right? To me as a catcher, what people would mean, what I would tell my pitchers is we always got to have one pitch that we can go back to and throw a strike with. No matter what is working, no matter what situation in the game, we have to have one pitch that we can throw a strike with, no matter anything. That's what we have. That's what that is, right? If it's lost, we still got to have that one that I know that I can get this over the plate.
I think part of it too is like, it's fear. Like when we talk about, guys are afraid to get hit sometimes, and it brings you brought back a funny story for me because I got to play for Doc Edwards, and Doc Edwards would sit in the dugout and he would yell at pitchers, some of these young guys sometimes, and I was actually on his side for some of these, and
that's awesome.
He would yell, "Mickey Mantle's dead, throw strikes." And this is a guy who played with Mickey Mantle. And what that meant, was, hey, Mickey Mantle could absolutely destroy a pitcher, right? Versus he's saying none of these guys are Mickey Mantle. So go after these guys, right? Go after these guys. Now, it's not to say there's not other good hitters besides Mickey Mantle, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think you see where that phrase comes from when guys are being timid and scared versus I think sometimes how we see it is like, is it really that simple? And we all know it's not, right? Because sometimes the psychological, the stuff comes in where it's like, you are afraid out there. Like this guy could really do some damage right now, or whatever these guys are thinking. And I think it's a shift, right? Where we're same thing, we're going back to culture, but in our practices, we're teaching them to minimize damage, but we're also teaching guys to go after guys, like to attack, to be a guy that's all over your zone, right? Like you feel like if somebody hits you, they got lucky. The next guy, you're going right back after him.
That and I'll say like that with that mindset and that approach with that, like what you're talking about, the best pitcher I've ever coached played at an AIA. And the reason he was the best pitcher was he had major league run, arm side run on it, like 24, 25 inches, right? Just nuts. But every single person that he faced was uncomfortable. Because no matter what, he reminded me a lot of you, John. Like y'all are like very similar in like the arm and stuff like that. But like no matter what, everybody was uncomfortable because that dude was catching the ball. And as soon as he caught the ball, the glove went right here and he was looking in your soul. He wasn't even looking at the catcher. He was looking straight at you. And it's like everybody, we're talking like pro guys hit against him, like big time guys will hit against him. Like, dude, that kid, like, he's coming from my soul. He's like 16, 17 years old, right? And you sit there and it's like, that's what we want, whether it's hitting, catching, fielding, pitching, where it's that wins more than anything. I was talking to some of my players about that today. I said, look, so many of y'all, and we talk about this all the time, right? But it's just a refresher for them of like, it's almost never mechanical. Almost never. There's some times where you can always clean stuff up, especially when you're dealing with the elite of the elite. But most times it's not, because if you have belief, actual belief is so scarce in the world and even more scarce in baseball and softball. Like if you have belief, you win. You 100% win because that person on the mound has something that's wrong with their delivery, with their arm action, with whatever it is. And if you have that belief, that whatever you want to call it, you're going to win most times just out of sheer force. I am going to win.
Willpower. It's iron will. Yeah, it's having that. That's something that Libby always had, where it was like, even when he was younger, before his stuff came, it was like that kid competed and he went after guys and he had this just undominable will where no matter what he did, he was going to find a way to beat you.
Mm-hmm.
Might have been a quick pitch, might have been a curveball, might have been a changeup, but there was something that he was going to do to get you off your game.
So I'm glad you brought that up. You saw that early on. You've been with that kid for, a long time. How did you facilitate that what you just described? How did you facilitate that as the mentor to allow that to grow and blossom? So then when his pitches came, it was even better.
I mean, I would say I got some really good advice from Ron Wolforth, Texas Baseball Ranch guy. And he was talking about how you're good guys, similar to what we were talking about earlier, but you're good guys, you're never going to have to push them. It's going to be more like a racehorse where it's like you're going to have to pull back on the reins and know when to pull back on the reins. And I think for Libby, a lot of times he was internally motivated beyond belief. Like he would come for a lesson and he'd send me video 2 hours later of him doing something at home again. And there was this almost obsessive mindset that he had where he was always going to get better. That's part of the One Day Better project, right? Where it's like, it's you versus you, you're going to get better. But I think when it comes to guys like him or like a Brock Selvage, guys that are really internally driven, I think a lot of times it's just continuing to establish those lanes for them so they can trust you and they can have the blinders on, almost like the racehorse, where it's like the only thing they have is that tunnel vision through what they're doing. And I think that's continuing to breed in, seeing these guys going to pro ball now is like, you'll still see struggles, right? Everybody's going to struggle, especially once you get to those higher levels of the game. There's really good players, but you're going to see this undoubtable will again, where it's like, they're going to find a way. They might struggle, but they're going to find a way to get a little better. And then next time a little better and a little better. And it's not always the skills or the mechanics that's the solution, right? Like we talk about, it's the mindset. It's trusting your stuff. What does it mean to trust your stuff? Well, until you get hit, you never learn what it means to trust your stuff.
That's good.
Right? Until you give up some hard hit balls on your best pitch, that's when you're going to have to learn, and until you reach that point, you're going to dominate. It's going to be hard because you're going to rarely fail. So I think part of that too, as a coach, is setting up things in practice that are harder than the game. So your average pitch misses its spot by 15 inches. Well, we're going to play with the 9-hole square in the tunnel, and those squares are even smaller, and it's just little things where if you can make practice harder than the game, we're going to see more of what we're talking about with them playing the game.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Love it so much. Man, you said something about mechanics. I want to bounce this off you guys and what you think. Because there is so much part of it, right? Like there is the subconscious, and that just lets you operate. Especially for catchers, I need everything for them to be just second nature. I need them to start in good leverage positions. They can work from there because there's so much they have to do. So for instance, like, forgive me, John, if I'm missing a detail here. Where a pitcher's work ends is when he releases the ball. And whether it's good or whether it's bad, that's kind of it, right? That pitching motion's done. Now he's being an infielder. And forgive me, John, again, if I'm missing a detail. The catcher has to take care of that. And especially at younger levels, like you will hear coaches get on catchers for not stopping a ball versus a pitcher not throwing it correctly. And I feel like it's something that they have played catch before, and they think it's that easy when it's just not. So we're a catcher. We have to have this established. We have to have these mechanics, which I just think is efficiencies. How do you move efficiently? And velo exposes inefficiencies. How can I get you in a spot where you can handle chaos? Because you have to handle an umpire. You have to think about the current hitter. You have to think about the next guy on deck. If your coach acting like crazy, I've told umpires before, hey, if you have something that, like, if you need to talk to my coach, talk to me. He's on meds and he forgot him today. He's talk to me, right? And it's like that sometimes. And then you have to deal with the guy on the mound. And what's I love, because John was talking about horses and letting them run, the way I describe pitcher-catcher relations to a catcher, I was like, they're horses. Some are fast, some are strong, some are quick, some are agile, some are skittish. Some you just got to go give them a carrot. Like, you got to love on them a little bit. How can you help your horse run the race the best? And how can you get him along with the rest of the people on the field in the dugout so we can go hit? If you figure that out, you've won that game. Now you're operating a pitching staff. Now you're building that relationship and trust. Because that horse, every time it's his opportunity or her opportunity to run that race, they should want you behind the plate. And if it's not, we have room to improve.
That's really good. That's really good. Well, and Todd, talk a little bit about, you were talking about this the other day with the influx of softball catchers that you're getting, and you were talking about how they have to have a good relationship with the pitcher because the coach almost goes to the pitcher and says, hey, who do you want to catch you, right? So talk a little bit about that for people that didn't hear that or what. I thought that was like super valuable, super good.
Well, I think, and again, John, if I've ever saying anything about pitchers and you're like, hey, hold on a second, let me know. But what I have found for pitchers is when they're confident and they're comfortable, I get their best stuff. And as a catcher, I want that. One, it's so much easier when a pitcher's dialed in and they're ready to roll and they're hitting spots. Catching is a blast. It is fun. It is effortless. I don't have to work. When we're like limping across the finish line, I'm dying, and we still have 8 more innings left. So when you talk
so much of that's body language, right? I mean, too, between each other, right? Where it's we've done a battery camp before where it's like you got pitchers and you got catchers, right? And we're talking to them about, okay, when a catcher let's say he messes up a good pitch and the pitcher shows him up, that screws things up, right? Versus you act like nothing happened. And it's just like an infielder. Shortstop boots the ball. Hey, I'm going to get you another one. Hey, throw a great curveball. The catcher dumps it down out of the zone. So what? Right? Never show him up in between the lines, right? In between innings, if you guys need to talk about something, that's fine. But in between the lines, we gotta work together, and everybody feeds off that energy of the battery, right? Where everything flows from there.
Right. Well, I think it's called a battery for a reason, right? Like, first off, assault and battery. Don't show up, guys. But dude, like, if the battery's not working well, you're short circuiting, and everybody sees it, and there are sparks flying, and usually you're not going to have enough energy, and stuff's going to fail. So I think if you can figure out, and again, like I always say this, one of my favorite mound visits I ever did, we had a donkey, and he ended up going to play for LSU. He hated when guys came out to the mound. Hated. And I mean, big boy, big farm boy. And he was struggle busting. He had a great split finger, but he's struggle busting. So I go out there, and we had one more out to get, and he couldn't locate. So I turn around, give the ball to the umpire, and I go, hey, can I get a new ball? You know how pitchers are. He goes, yep, a new ball. I run out there. He is, I'm not going to say he's charging at me. He is walking with intent towards me because he's getting ready to bite my head off. And I go, hey, maybe this. And I drop the ball in his glove and just turn around and walk away. He's now standing. I've gone back to the plate. We get down. We go 1, 2, 3. See ya. Go back to the mound. He goes, Nis, that was phenomenal. He goes, I was so pissed at you. He goes, but you know what I wasn't thinking about? Missing the zone anymore. And he goes, that was perfect. That was phenomenal. And it's still like my best mound visit ever in my career that I can remember, from just understanding who they were, how the pitcher worked, what did I need to do for him, us having that relationship, me knowing what he liked, what he didn't like, and then getting him through that. And I think if you can do that, because pitchers are humans, right? Now they're crazy. Every legit pitcher I've ever known, I want like in a bar fight. There's stuff about it. I want them on my side. They're crazy. But I think you need that because pitching is a wildly difficult thing. I mean, what is it? 60 feet, like 1 degree of angle is a foot difference at 60. It's incredibly difficult. You're by yourself. There's no one there to help you. The closest guy is arguably like there's a very fine line, but between stupidity and stubbornness, and they call it catching. And like that's the guy there to help you. It's if you can figure out how to work those human relationships and help that horse run its race, I think you win. And it's incredibly difficult. But the first step is talking. Do you like pineapple pizza? Figure out the.
Because each guy's different too, right? I mean, we talk about this when we're coaching, but it's the same thing with catchers and pitchers. Is you got to know which ones to kick in the butt. You got to know which ones to give a pat on the back. You got to know which ones. Maybe one of my favorite catchers I ever threw to, Brandon Rogers. If I missed my spot, I knew it was coming back at my face as hard as I threw it to him. And there was a certain where, especially if I missed a couple in a row, where it's like, whack, you better be ready because BR was firing that biscuit right back at you. But he knew for me that I was good with that. Whereas other guys, you'd see him more flick it back to, whereas like for me it was like let's go, and he knew that I would respond properly to that versus other guys that are like take it easy or whatever, and it was like for me that was always a good thing, and I think when you talk about mound visits, right, Libby was a guy. Libby hated mound visits, right? If I had to come out there or whatever, especially when I was coaching him in senior year, and those mound visits a lot of times were for the infielders. Right. Where, hey, this is going on, and just a pat on his butt and walk away. Right. Versus like, and I think a lot of guys, when you go out there, Kevin Brown was my favorite pitcher growing up to watch. And he was the same way where it's like, he was the guy headbutting his catcher after the game. So that's the guy that, when he's on the mound, if you got something to say, it better be good. Otherwise, like what you did, you go out there and you hand him the ball and you walk away.
Yep.
I mean, that's knowing your horse. That's
awesome. I love it.
And I think too, like you talked about mentality and anticipation. I think when you have a guy like Libby, and again, I never got to play with him, but the stories that you've told me about him, where he's at, his career going through minor league ball, is much more mature for his age than almost anybody else. And I think he kind of knew the game plan. It reminded me of like Wooden's players. Wooden to coach guys that they can run their own game. They know how to solve problems. And at that point, I'm just here if you need me. Let me know. Run your race, dude.
I love that, man. That's so good. Well, man, I think, in my opinion, I would love to do maybe even a part 2 of this. I think we could have some even more cool conversations with stuff. So, man, this is such good conversation. It's so needed. And what's cool, right, for everybody listening and watching is you can see how it's a mix of real life human element, but then also baseball and how it all kind of plays together, right? People look at all these like human element, mechanics, this as separate texts, and they kind of are, but they all mix together. And we gotta have that. And I think that's one of the cool parts of this. So, I know John will be good with this. Maybe doing Todd, if it works out next week, like let's do another part, man. I think it'd be great. Just such good, wholesome, important conversation. So, just absolutely awesome, man. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom and your heart and just your stories and just why you're doing what you're doing and all that stuff, man. So, John, and thank you as always, man, for being you and doing what you do and just being an open book with so many things, man. It's what the baseball world needs, what the world needs, if we're going to be really honest. So, y'all are both awesome. Absolute privilege to just sit here and listen to y'all and listen to the awesome conversation, man. So y'all are awesome, and I say we do it again next week.
I'm down. Love you, boys. I'm down.
That's awesome. All right, y'all. Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Y'all are awesome, and we will talk at you next week. And as John says, thanks for breathing. Keep doing it.
Oh, man.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm sure you were able to get a lot out of that. So because of that, make sure that you share this, right? Make sure that you put it out on social media, on your stories. Make sure that you subscribe, give us a 5-star review, because our passion is to see the game grow. And our passion is to see you become the best baseball or softball player that you can. So go ahead and do that for us. And I can't wait to see you on the next episode.